What's going on, everybody? Back again today to do another video that is DC related. I know I'm not wearing my Batman shirt, but oh well. But yeah, had some time off work. I've been working on this video for a really long time. This is going to be the second video in my kind of like what happened explanation series of videos. I'm also planning one talking about Star Wars Rebels. And basically these what happened videos. This is my take on what went wrong and where the thing went wrong. And yeah, so I'm going to try to be as objective as possible. And I don't work for these people. I don't work for DC. I'm not in the industry. So some of this is guesswork, and I'm going to try to be very clear about when I am making guesses as to what happened. But for the most part, I've done the research that I can. I've talked to the people that were available to me to talk to, and this is the story I have to tell. What happened with DC Rebirth? Well, when we left off in my last video, it was the New 52, what happened, and the New 52 led right into Rebirth. There was that little convergence bullshit in there, but that doesn't matter. So let's just go ahead and dive into this presentation. So DC Rebirth, what happened? Before we get into DC Rebirth, it's important to understand where we are now. By the way, real quick here, should note that during this I'm also taking this opportunity to smoke this nice cigar. Anybody that's into cigars, Drew Estate is really killing the game with coffee-infused cigars. This is their Isla del Sol. It's like a coffee-flavored, coffee-infused hand-rolled cigar. Really good. Great with a cup of coffee. So, yeah, anybody out there that likes cigars, definitely recommend giving these a try. Their Java brand is also pretty good. So if there's any long pauses in this video where I don't talk, or maybe not long, but if there's any pauses where I don't talk, it's because I'm probably using this. But anyway, back to the presentation. So in order to understand what happened with Rebirth, we have to understand where we are now. And where we are now is we just got done with DC Dark Knight's Death Metal, which led right into this Infinite Frontier thing that we've got going on now. And for the most part, I really want to like Infinite Frontier and I really want to get into it. There's just two problems with me. One, I thought death metal and metal were rather stupid. I just did. There were moments in both metal and death metal that were just really corny and cheesy and campy. A lot of these just really wacky offshoots of like there is a version of Batman, an evil version of Batman in this story, and it's a version of Batman who became evil and tyrannical, and he digitally uploaded his consciousness into the giant robot dinosaur that he had in the Batcave, and he calls himself Bat-Rex. Like, come on, DC, look, like, I know that, like, you guys over there, you're really big into, like, creativity and imaginative shit, but as much as you don't want to believe this is true, there is a certain point where creativity stops being creativity and it just starts being stupid and silly. And that's kind of where you've gone with a lot of this. But I really just want to ignore metal, and move into Infinite Frontier. But then we get to the other part of why I find it hard to do that, and that's that as much as they want to tell us this makes sense, it does not make sense. Right now with Infinite Frontier, the whole story is, as a result of this event, Death Metal, the multiverse has been all of DC, I'm just going to call it that, all of DC has been rewritten and put under this big umbrella term called the Omniverse. And basically what the Omniverse is it's a storytelling plot device excuse that the creators at DC get to use to justify saying things like, everything happened, everything is canon. Everything. Absolutely every fucking thing. And that just doesn't work. It doesn't make sense that way. And I'm going to explain how it doesn't make sense in this video. If you are liking Infinite Frontier and you like DC the way it is, and even though it doesn't make sense, that's fine. It's totally allowed. You can like it. Unfortunately, though, if you're one of those people out there who is really liking DC because you're lying to yourself and telling yourself that it makes sense because you need it to, and if it didn't make sense, you wouldn't like it. I'm sorry, but I'm about to crush your reality with this video. If that's you, don't watch this video, because this video will crush your entire reality. After you watch this video, you will not be able to lie to yourself anymore and tell yourself that it makes sense. So, let's move on. So, anyone who's been watching my channel knows that I just recently read The Multiversity by Grant Morrison, and I really liked it. It showed me that the multiverse within DC can be used in a positive way, and it can be used to tell fun and interesting stories. The key thing to remember here for the people at DC is that, remember, the multiverse is a setting, not the story itself. When you try to make the multiverse the plot, when you try to make the multiverse the story itself, then it gets fucked up. The multiverse is a setting, and it is a very cool and unique setting that allows for different stories, but the multiverse is not the story itself, it's just the setting. And the things I really liked about it, it set up this new villain called the Gentry. Really want to know more about this deal, what's going on over here. And it also established this new multiversal Justice League called Justice Incarnate, and it's made up of alternate reality versions of DC heroes from other worlds. Like none of these characters here on the team are from the same universe. They're all from different universes. Captain Carrot, this weird Power Ranger Batman, Aqua Woman, Earth 23 Superman, whose real name is Calvin Ellis, and he is his secret identity is he's the president of the United States. This dude Thunderer, who's basically a DC version of Thor. This weird combination of Alan Scott and Abin Sur into this weird Green Lantern. It's all just great. I think it's really fun and unique, and I want to see more of this. And that's another reason that I kind of want to like Infinite Frontier. Because Infinite Frontier right now is heavily featuring this Justice Incarnate team, which leads me to believe that we're going to be getting more of this in Infinite Frontier. There's a hump that you got to get over if you want to enjoy Infinite Frontier, and that's that none of it makes any fucking sense. So let's just get into the Rebirth, finally. Rebirth started with this event, this one-shot comic right here that was released in mid-2016, and what this did was it established that Barry Allen did not cause the New 52. We thought that he did cause it with the Flashpoint. He did not. Turns out it was caused by this guy, Dr. Manhattan from the Watchmen storyline, and what this dude's deal is, suffice it to say, he is an omnipotent godlike being with godlike power. This guy can take... this guy could take a house, break it down to its atoms, and reconstruct it as a horse. He's unfathomably powerful. Let's just leave it at that. Barry Allen, turns out, with his Flashpoint nonsense, that did not create the New 52. That event just got this guy's attention. It was kind of like a little beacon of light, and this guy noticed the DC universe for the first time, and was kind of like, ooh, what's this? I'm gonna mess around here and check things out. And it shows you all of Rebirth culminates, or it was supposed to culminate, with this story Doomsday Clock, which shows you exactly what Dr. Manhattan did to create the to create the New 52. So what did he do? Well, he erased all of the legacy that there was in DC. For those of you who don't know, there was there was the Golden Age characters of DC, and then the Silver Age characters, and then the Modern Age. The Golden Age is stuff like the JSA, the Justice Society of America, which consists of the Alan Scott Green Lantern, the original Green Lantern, Jay Garrick Flash, the original Flash, Dr. Fate, Wildcat, a lot of other characters, Dr. Midnight, Hourman, characters like this. And Dr. Manhattan, what he did was he went into the timeline of the main DC universe, and the mainline one, and he stopped Alan Scott, this guy, from ever becoming the original Green Lantern back in 1940. Let's just keep it at that. You can read Doomsday Clock if you want, but I'm just going to suffice it to say he stopped this dude from ever becoming the original Green Lantern back in 1940. Because he never became the original Green Lantern back then, he never went on to establish the Justice Society of America. Because the Justice Society of America was never established, by the time Clark came to Earth and was being raised by his human parents, they were saying shit to him like, don't reveal yourself, it's a bad idea, people would be scared, people will hate you. Originally, though, we find out, we find this out because eventually Superman and Dr. Manhattan have an encounter with each other, and Dr. Manhattan is persuaded to correct what he did. So he goes back and he makes it so that this guy does become the Green Lantern. And in that doing so, he makes it so that he does go on to found the JSA. And because the JSA exists back in like the 1940s and World War II time, now we have this world where Clark is instead being told by his parents, like, no, reveal yourself to be Superman. You know, we've seen super beings before back during like World War II. They were awesome. They made the world a better place. They inspired us. You know, go be Superman. It's supposed to be like it changes the events of things. And what this does is it basically was meant to take us back to prior to the Flashpoint. Rebirth, the entire purpose of Rebirth and its big event at the end, which is Doomsday Clock, what it was supposed to do was it was supposed to take the New 52 and throw it in the trash and just get us back to where we were before they tried to do this dumb New 52 shit. And it kind of worked, but not really, and we're going to get into why. This is a picture from like towards the end of Doomsday Clock, and you see Superman, and now all these characters are back. All the JSA characters, all the Legion of Superhero characters from the future, they're all back now because Dr. Manhattan went and recorrected his mistake. But why does this not work? Well, we're going to get into it. It's because of timeline problems. For those of you who are still kind of like in your brains, you're thinking of time travel in the old school kind of Back to the Future way. Like if you change something in the past, the way it was before in the future just kind of disappears and changes as well. That's not the way that we really think of stuff like that in science fiction anymore. There's a new way that we kind of think of time travel and time alterations, and it involves the use of a multiverse. And this is exactly what DC does when DC has a multiverse. This is how it works. So if we look at this black line here with the arrow pointing that way, this represents the flow of time in a linear fashion. Well, let's say, now for this picture we have the blue line representing normal time. Let's say somewhere in the normal events of time you were in a terrible car accident and you lost both your legs. This event, that's what this blue dot here represents. This event traumatized you and you lived your life in misery and you hated it, and eventually you decided, you know what, I'm going to dedicate my life to science and I'm going to figure out how to build a time machine and I'm going to go back in time and stop the accident from happening. So you do that. You go down here and you're into the future and you figure it out and you reach success. You build the time machine. Here is the red dot that represents you using the time machine to go back in time, and you go back to the event of the accident and you stop the accident from happening, or you stop yourself from getting in the car. Basically, you make it so that you were never in the accident and you didn't lose your legs. That does not erase or change any of this shit. All it does is it causes time and reality to fracture, split off, and now there is a second alternate timeline where you did not lose your legs. This stuff still happened, and here's why. The only reason the time where you have both your legs exists is because you went back and changed it. The only reason you went back and changed it is because you made the commitment to yourself to invent a time machine, and the only reason you did that was because you lost your legs in the first place. It is all a sort of like spiraling series of events that all have to occur in order for any of them to occur. So, when things get changed in the past through time travel or time manipulation, it does not rewrite history. It just splits off and creates a new timeline where things are different. It creates an alternate reality. It creates another universe, and now we have a multiverse. And another split. Now there's 3. Oh, another split. Now there's another split. Now there's 5. This is how we get the DC multiverse. All right? So, Dr. Manhattan changed something in the past on the timeline. If we're looking at it as this black line, the black arrow is the original timeline, and all of these are alternate realities that have spawned off of that. Well, let's examine that. So here we have the exact same thing, and we're going to go ahead and use this lighter green color to represent Alan Scott becoming Green Lantern for the first time back in 1940, way back here. All right? And then we'll use, let's say, if Dr. Manhattan comes into the DC multiverse, He was in this universe, let's be real. And we'll just have it be black. So this is where he came into the multiverse. That's an event in the timeline. He came into the DC universe, the main one here. And he decides to go back and fuck around with shit. So he goes back over here and he alters this. Makes it so that it didn't happen. Once again, this does not rewrite all of reality. It just causes reality to splinter off again into a new timeline. And then what's even more crazy is from here, just like it did up here, other realities can also splinter off. From alternate realities can splinter off of alternate realities. It happens all the time in this fictional universe. So now, we didn't rewrite this shit. We did not rewrite the multiverse. What we did was we just created another new universe, another new set of alternate realities. That's the way it should work. But DC wrote the New 52 as if to say that by him removing this lantern, it rewrote all of this history in here. It rewrote all of this shit. That's not the way it should work. And now, in the events of Infinite Frontier, where we are currently in the year 2021, DC's saying, no, that's not what happened. What happened was exactly what you just described. It splintered off and created the New 52 multiverse, a new branch of reality, or new series of branches of reality. And I'm sitting here going, yeah, but that's not how you originally wrote it. You originally wrote it that by him doing this, it just rewrote all this shit. And now you're changing your mind. And that doesn't really work. Because let's take a look at some more stuff here. There are contradicting events here in this shit. So it's like Dr. Manhattan put stuff right, okay? He makes sure that Alan Scott becomes Green Lantern. Great. Between pre-New 52 and New 52, let's just call it Old 52 and New 52. In Old 52, there was certain events that happened, and then in New 52, they redid those same events and did a retelling. Now, you might be sitting here going, well, that's fine. That's fine because they're alternate realities anyway. They can have slightly different versions of the same event. That is correct. For example, here, Old 52. This is the origin story of how Supergirl Kara Zor-El came to Earth. When they did New 52, they gave her this origin story. They are not the same. And like I said, you might be thinking, that's fine. They're supposed to be different branches, different series of branches of reality. Another example. New 52 did a new origin story of the Justice League that showed not only Cyborg joining the Justice League and being a founding member, it also showed him that on the day he became Cyborg, he immediately joined the Justice League, and he was never on the Teen Titans team. This contradicts Old 52, this beloved famous Teen Titans story arc by Marv Wolfman, the Judas Contract. Because here we see Cyborg, and he's on the Teen Titans. Well, according to this storytelling, he was never on the Teen Titans. But in this one, he is. Once again, you can sit here and chalk it up to, yeah, but it's different realities. It's different realities, so they can have different series of events. Sure, fine. But how do we explain this? Old 52, in the story Final Crisis, Bruce Wayne gets hit by Darkseid's Omega Beams and gets fucking zapped, and we think he's dead for a while. Turns out he's not dead. The Omega Beams just zapped him and displaced him in time, and in the story Batman: The Return of Bruce Wayne, we see him have to work his way forward through time to get back to the present. It's a weird but interesting story, I guess, but that's not the point. This stuff, everything I just talked about, him getting hit by the Omega Beams, getting displaced in time, having to work his way back forward, that is Old 52. Later on in the New 52, they did a story where Darkseid gets turned into a baby. Once again, it's weird, I know. It's called Darkseid War, and at the end of Darkseid War, Darkseid gets turned into a baby. Later on in Dark Knight's Metal, Batman says, I am going to use Baby Darkseid to use his Omega Beams to send me back and displace me in time. Okay, but this is clearly New 52 Batman with New 52 Darkseid, so how does New 52 Batman and New 52 Darkseid, how does he know about the events of Old 52? It's clearly New 52 Batman. He's got the baby Darkseid that came right out of Darkseid War, which is New 52, but he's talking about events that he should not know about. They did not happen in the New 52. So, in other words, if we go back to this paint, let's back it up a little bit here. Like I said, Dr. Manhattan changes the event, creates the New 52. Later on down here, we'll use... Fuck it, I'm running out of colors at this point. We'll use pink. Dr. Manhattan is convinced by Superman, or whatever, to correct his mistake. So he goes back again to his mistake, fixes it, makes sure Alan Scott becomes Green Lantern, which should take us back here to normal time. Basically, what I'm saying here is the version of these characters here in this world, in this portion of the multiverse, and the version of Superman, Batman, Justice League, all the characters that are part of Dr. Manhattan's fucked up New 52 multiverse portion, they should not have knowledge of each other's events. They are separate realities. Or are they? That's the thing. DC doesn't know, and they have yet to figure out a way to reconcile this. This is proof right here. This is not old 52 Batman. This is not pre-Flashpoint Batman. This is New 52 Batman. And somehow, with New 52 Baby Darkseid, and somehow he is aware of the fact that Darkseid abilities once sent him back in time. He says it right here. He's like, you don't understand, Omega Beams once unhinged me from the time itself and sent me back to the beginning of man. He says it right there. How? DC's trying to tell you that, oh, through some wibbly wobbly timey-wimey bullshit, we merged the two. What do you mean you merged the two? What do you mean you merged the two? How did you take two completely separate events and merge them together? That doesn't work. People would have two separate memories of the same occasion. How would Supergirl, if we go back, if you remember my previous slide in the presentation, Supergirl would be walking around with two origin stories in her brain. She'd have two distinct memories of arriving on Earth. Which one's the real one? Well, the easiest way to say this would be to say, okay, well, if we're going to mesh the two, basically what it comes down to is we will only keep the stuff from the New 52 that does not contradict the Old 52. If it's part of the New 52 and it contradicts the Old 52, then it goes in the trash. Well, that would be all well and good, and I kind of feel like that's the way they were headed. More or less, we're going to scrap the New 52. We're going to scrap as much of it as possible. If there's some parts of it that we can salvage and kind of mesh into the timeline and just make it all seem really coherent and cohesive, then great, we will. But if it's part of the New 52 and it contradicts Old 52, then it's out. And that was originally the plan. And the plan was pretty much developed by this guy. This is Jeff Johns. And pretty much think of Jeff Johns like this. Jeff Johns is like the Emperor of Mankind in Warhammer 40k, but for DC. Everything this man touches and does that's DC related is gold. It's awesome. It works out really well. He gets this stuff. He gets this universe. And this is Gary Frank, one of my favorite DC illustrators. Jeff Johns and Gary Frank, they launched Rebirth with that initial one-shot comic. And they were the two that were going to work on Doomsday Clock and put out Doomsday Clock. Well, and it was all going to work out. Like I said, it was all going to work out. Doomsday Clock was going to fix everything. It was pretty much going to throw the New 52 in the trash, with the exception of some events from the New 52 that could be meshed without contradicting things. And then it was late. Doomsday Clock was late as fuck. DC Rebirth launched mid-2016, and typically when DC does an initiative like this, they announce the initiative, they premiere it, they let the stories run with the initiative for a year, building up to the end of year culmination event of the year that culminates the whole initiative, and that was going to be Doomsday Clock. So ideally, we would have seen, DC Rebirth launched mid-2016, Doomsday Clock starting mid-2017. Doomsday Clock was half a year late. Just starting, it was half a year late. So it didn't start until the end of 2017, and it didn't end until the end of 2019. So I have my math a little wrong here. Mid 2016, it was supposed to start in mid 2017. It started at the end. So it took, not only was it 6 months late getting started, it took 2 years to finish. That's what happened. And DC's over here going, guys, we gotta fill this time with something else. It's taken them way too long to write Doomsday Clock, and we gotta publish some shit. Like, we gotta put comics out. We gotta think of something else. So they went to this guy, or maybe this guy went to them. This is one of those things where I don't know. I'm not in the industry. This is Scott Snyder. Scott Snyder is responsible for writing quite possibly the only true good thing that came out of the New 52, and that was the New 52 run on Batman. Some of this stuff is absolutely, it's just fantastic. It's really great. So basically what happens is DC's like, yo, Scott, you single-handedly wrote pretty much the only good thing to come out of this company in the last 8 years. Do you have any idea, when Doomsday Clock's late, do you have any ideas of what we could do in the meantime? And Scott Snyder's like, fuck yes I do. I'm a writer. Like, that's all I do is come up with ideas. And he came up with Dark Knight's Metal. And DC needed to publish something, and he had this idea, I guess, so they were like, okay, we're going to run with Dark Knight's Metal. Little did they know that with Dark Knight's Metal, Scott Snyder was completely undermining the whole intentions of Rebirth, the whole purpose of Rebirth and Doomsday Clock, which was to throw as much of the New 52 in the trash as possible. And I guess he didn't want to do that, which kind of makes sense because, like I said, his portion of the New 52 was really good, the Batman portion, and I guess he's just one of those people that was like, we shouldn't take all this hard work that these creators have been doing the past 8 years. I get it. It hasn't been the most successful, it hasn't been the most well-received, but it's still artistic, free expression work that these artists have and creators have, put their time into for the past 8 years, and I don't think we should just throw it all in the trash. So Dark Knight's Metal was it was step one in his plan to just save the New 52 by making everything, every single thing in DC canon. Everything's canon. Everything happened. Even though that doesn't make a lick of sense, it all happened. So, editorial infighting at DC began. Jeff Johns apparently was more focused on his TV writing. This was during that time period where, like I said, since Jeff Johns is like the golden boy, they were trying to have him do every fucking thing. They were trying to have him work on the movies, the TV shows, the comics, everything. And it led to Doomsday Clock being late. The other guy at DC, Dan DiDio, he insisted on this new 5G initiative, which would have led to like all of the key characters of DC, all the A-listers getting replaced with like new generational characters. Batman was going to get replaced by a new guy. Superman was going to get replaced by his son, Jonathan Kent, so on and so forth. A lot of the writers and the fans expressed no interest in this new 5G initiative, so DiDio went bye-bye. 5G was abandoned, and with nothing else going on, Jeff Johns and Gary Frank still late as fuck on Doomsday Clock, Snyder gained more influence, and we got death metal. And death metal, long story short, without making a lick of sense, just ends up telling us that everything in DC is canon, everything happened somehow it happened. It's like I said, it's one of those stories, it's like things worked out because the writers say they worked out. Basically, the way it goes down is there's a giant battle at the end. The universe, the multiverse, the omniverse, whatever you want. That's the thing. DC, they try to throw these like fancy words at us like omniverse and metaverse, thinking that it's going to like convince, just by the way it sounds, it's going to convince us like, oh, okay, they thought this out. They came up with a new word. They came up with a new term for the DC vocabulary, which means they've really put a lot of thought into this. No, they just thought up the word omniverse. Like, it didn't take a lot of effort. Figuring out a fucking linear, cohesive timeline, that would take a lot of effort. But at the end of Death Metal, there's a giant battle. Pretty much the entire multiverse, omniverse, whatever you want to call it, it gets obliterated. And Wonder Woman kind of sacrifices herself to defeat the Batman Who Laughs, which is the main villain. And she succeeds, she kills him, but it doesn't stop like the overall destruction of the multiverse. But then these like completely omnipotent beings, these like gods of the DC universe, they're called the Hands. We've never seen them before. In the 80 something years of DC, we've never heard of these fucking beings. At least I haven't. And that's the thing, like if I haven't heard of them in the past like 14 years that I've been into DC, then they're clearly not relevant enough to be using them in this story. Like it's just an easy way. Anyway, these hands, the god hands, the hands of the god, whatever they are, they kind of come to Wonder Woman in this sort of afterlife, and they're kind of like, we admire your bravery and the bravery of all those who fought, even though you failed and the multiverse has been destroyed. The DC Omniverse multiverse has been destroyed. We admire your bravery. We admire your sacrifice. So we're going to use our unlimited godly power to restore it all in a perfect fashion. It's all going to exist. We're going to use our godly, and it's like, imagine if Wonder Woman had asked them how. It's like, how are you going to do that? How are you going to make everything fit? And the gods, basically their answer was, we're gods. We can do that. And Wonder Woman went, okay. Like, that's the thing that pisses me off, is kind of like, it just doesn't seem like a very good story that way. Because it's just like, I don't know. Why did we go through all this trouble just for this really quick, easy answer? You know what I mean? It's like, oh, well, the gods weren't going to remake the multiverse. The only reason they did it was because the heroes of DC persuaded them that it was worth it. It's like, yeah, but at the end of the day, you wrote it that way. You could have just as easily written it to be, they decided no, it's not good enough for, it's just, I don't know. Some people are going to get what I'm trying to say, some people won't. Like, I'm looking for a story that, like, the events of the story play out in a way that you actually go, like, oh, that worked out that way because it had to work out that way, because it was meant to work out that way. Logic dictates it works out that way. It's not just something that the writers wrote. That's what I'm looking for. And Death Metal didn't give us that. But, I mean, who's not going to be pleased? Especially like when you look at the creator side of DC, the people working for it, who's not going to be pleased? On one hand, you've got like Jeff Johns' idea, which they were on board with for a while. Jeff Johns' idea of like, look, we're just going to take as much of the New 52 as possible and throw it in the trash, and that's what Rebirth's for. But then he ends up not sticking around to make sure that happens, and Scott Snyder comes along and is like, guys, like, if you let me do my shit, I'll make sure all of our stuff gets to stick around. All of our stuff is canonized. Everyone wins. There are no losers. No one's stuff gets thrown away. Everyone wins. Who's not going to side with that dude? Everyone's going to side with that dude because he's saying he can ensure the validity of all of your work. So, but I don't think we should ensure the validity of everyone's work. I don't think we live in a world where there's no such thing as a wrong answer. I think we do live in a world where there are wrong answers. I think you can be wrong. I think you can fail. In fact, it's a fact. Like, you can fail. And even in something like the field of art, I think it's possible to fail at being an artist. Some people would disagree with me. They're like, there is no wrong answer when it comes to art. I disagree. Like, if you have failed at being an artist when your art, you have failed at being an artist when you're no longer able to keep making art and also maintain a living. That's when you've failed. Like, if you're a homeless person on the street, like, fucking doodling on a fucking paper bag, and you're like, oh, I'm an art. No, you're a homeless fucking bum. Like, you're not an artist. Like, you're a homeless bum doodling with a piece of chalk on a paper bag. Like, if that's what it leads you to, in other words, what I'm saying is it's got to make money. You got to make a living off of it. And in order to do that, people have to want to pay for it and buy it. And in order to do that, you have to make sure that they want to pay for it and buy it. So if you make the art just all about you, then you run the risk of just failing as an artist. You have to compromise a little bit at some point. Sometimes you have to compromise a lot. But yeah, Scott Snyder offered them a way out. He said, "I'll offer you a way out, completely compromise free. Everyone's work will be valid. Everyone's work will stay canon. No one's work is getting thrown in the trash." Boom. And there are going to be some people out there that are just kind of like, "Well, why do you have a problem with that? Like, that's such a good, nice ending. And look, now DC it's constructed in a way that like it's there's something for everyone because everything's canon, everything's valid, everything exists. So there's something for everyone." And I'm like, no, there's not something for everyone, because there are a portion of people out there that want a cohesive, well thought out narrative. And that's not what we have. We don't have that at all in that's not true. We have the DCAU still, which is like the last ray of hope in my opinion. But not much of DC is for the people who want a well thought out, cohesive narrative. So, no, there's not something in DC for everyone. You forgot about those people. And people have told me over the years, like, well, hey man, if that's how you feel, then maybe DC just isn't for you. Maybe it's just not for you. Maybe there's others. You need to just find something else. And I've kind of taken that into consideration. I have. I'm definitely not as big of a DC fan as I used to be. Marvel is definitely rising for me, because regardless of people who want to say the Marvel comics are the exact same way, it's like, yeah, the Marvel comics are, but the MCU's not. The MCU is one well thought out, cohesive narrative, well put together by a good group of people that understand this thing. They understand Marvel at its core. So I don't need the comics to be this fucking one cohesive narrative. I've got the MCU. And the way I typically read Marvel comics is I watch something from the MCU, I look up what it's based off of, what comic books were used as inspiration for that, and then I go buy those and read those just to, sample the source material that was used to create that. And I really, if I could do that with DC, that's what I would do. But DC has no, other than the DCAU, DC has no movie or movie, TV, or animated. Well, I guess the AU is animated. They don't. There's no MCU for DC. There's not. So yeah. But that's my take on what happened with Rebirth. It's really kind of sad because we were really, really close to just getting back to like the best era of DC. Think about it like this. So, back in like prior to like the 80s, back in from like the beginning of DC all the way up to like 1985, 1986, DC had a multiverse and it got super convoluted and super crazy and didn't make a lick of sense. And so in the mid 80s, they did Crisis on Infinite Earths, which said fuck all that. They threw a bunch of canon in the trash. They took a bunch of existing canon and they threw it in the trash, and they went to a stable one universe timeline. And doing that led DC to its greatest era that it's ever had, from the mid 80s up to like through the 2000s. Greatest era DC's ever had. And then they fucked it all up. And they fucked it all up by trying to do the New 52. It didn't work out. And ever since then, it's been damage control. That's all they've been trying to do, is damage control. And here's my bit of advice. For those of you who don't know, Marvel did something similar a while back. It was called Heroes Reborn. It was basically like their version of the New 52. But they caught on really quick that it was like bad and not well received, and they scrapped it. They did a storyline that got rid of their New 52, threw it in the trash, and then they never fucking mentioned it again. They wrote the storyline that fixed it. They wrote it in a way that completely got rid of it and made it non-canon and didn't fucking matter. So now if you want to read Marvel, you don't have to go through and read that portion of Heroes Reborn, their New 52. You can just skip that and it won't even matter. That's how they should have handled the New 52. And that's what Doomsday Clock was originally going to do, I feel like, but it just ended up being so late that it got fucked. It's a shame, and it's a shame because they, as great as Jeff Johns is, they spread him too thin. You know, like if they would have put him on just the movies, just the TV shows, or just the comics, we would either have a great DC films franchise, a great DC TV universe, or a great DC Comics universe. But they spread him too thin, and now we don't have much of anything. We just have the DCAU, which is just trudging along through the form of the two comics, Batman Adventures Continue and Justice League Infinity, and that's the only saving grace. That's the only little ray of hope for DC. But yeah, that's my video on what happened with DC Rebirth. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If anyone has any additional information that is pertinent to this conversation that I'm not aware of, please share it. Anybody, you can share whatever you want. If you think I'm wrong, whatever, I don't care. Get a conversation started. Leave some comments below. If you like this video, please hit the like button. Check out some of the other videos on my channel. Maybe subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.